Let's say you've started playing a car racing game, and it starts out and it asks you to create the car you're going to play with. And you've been going through the menus. Most of it is pretty cosmetic, paint schemes, maybe the specific styling on your spoiler. There's been a little bit of gameplay affecting things like kind of tires you're using, or the size of the engine, or things like that. But then you suddenly hit this screen, which says, please pick your differential. And it just barfs a bunch of different differentials at you with no context. For a lot of people, this is going to be a very confusing moment. They may not actually know exactly what a differential does. And even if they do, they probably don't know the difference between these 8 different differentials. Players, people in general, don't like to feel confused in most cases, especially if they're being treated like they should obviously have known the answer to something. As they're going through this car creation, and they're dealing with mostly cosmetic things, and then suddenly they hit this thing which is asking them for information that they don't understand, but it's acting like they should understand. A lot of people are going to get upset by that. In general, the player doesn't want to be confused. Now, there are some exceptions to that. When a player is playing a puzzle game, then in that case, they are entering into a contract to be willing to be confused to some degree, with an understanding that as they understand the mechanics, as they think about what's going on, they will figure out the answer to the puzzle and solve the puzzle. That's the contract that exists in a puzzle game. But even there, you can cross into this frustrating confusion. There's something that's called moon logic in puzzle games, where the solution to the puzzle only makes sense to the person who made the puzzle, and is, as a result, effectively indecipherable to anyone else. You see this in a lot of older text-based games where you had to stick the mustache in the burger in order to make the seagull fly away. This kind of moon logic kind of holds together, but in the moment, in the environment of the puzzle game, doesn't actually make any sense. When you're creating this car game, it can be tempting to think that people who are really into cars would really like this differential selection screen. And that may be true, but if you are trying to make a game that's going to appeal to a larger audience, you need to recognize that both kinds of players are coming through this screen. Both people who will know what all 8 of these differentials means and will be able to pick the one that best suits their style of driving, and a bunch of people who will have no idea what these mean and are going to be frustrated by the question. So removing the screen isn't necessarily an answer either, because for those people that expect this degree of realism in your car racing game, it may be off-putting to them to remove this screen. They're going to wonder why you didn't ask them about the differential. So what do? First instinct could be to just simply describe what each of the differentials is. Give the player additional information when they're making their choice. It's possible to make this work, but if you just barf up a definition of each of the differentials, it's not necessarily going to help. This definition doesn't really help you make an informed decision about if this is the differential you should pick, right? You can write something that will get them there. Additionally, something you actually do see in a lot of games is you simplify down what this means. You reduce the stats of your car into a few key numbers: speed and maneuverability and rollover protection. And then you show how each of these differentials affects those different numbers. That will help with the people who are coming in not really knowing what the different differentials are, but again, you are undermining what the more advanced players might be expecting you to give them. A different option would be to push the differentials into more advanced settings. When the player comes through here on their first playthrough, this isn't even an option. You unlock differentials later in the game when the player has a better understanding of what effect they might have and what they might be actually looking for in the game. Alternatively, you have this available during the car creation, but you push it into an advanced mode. You just automatically pick a differential, but give an advanced setting for more advanced players to pick something else. This is a partial solution because it will mean that a bunch of your players won't be exposed to this confusion. But some of your players who are very optimized players will try to figure this out even if they don't really understand what you're giving them. So they are going to try to optimize their car and go into a screen they don't understand and still get frustrated. But it does help to some degree. One thing to keep in mind when you are dealing with these complicated options that are implying a large degree of functionality is that you probably need to pay that off. If you ask the player to pick their differential and they're coming in and they do understand what the different differentials actually mean, they're going to expect to see a difference between these 8 differentials. If they're basically exactly the same, except for 1 or 2 tiny differences in the game, you are going to disappoint the players who know what they're looking for. And in that case, you've basically ended up in the worst of all possible worlds. You've confused and frustrated the people who don't understand what you're asking them, and you're not actually paying off that choice for the people who do understand. So when you are putting something confusing into the game, ask yourself, is the payoff for the people who do understand this worth the confusion? If the answer is no, you're better off removing the confusion and making the game more understandable to more people. I focused on the creation of a car for a racing game, but this sort of confusion that turns off a player can happen in any game. And it can happen pretty much anywhere in the game. The very beginning of your game, when the player is just trying to get their feet under them, is the place where you are actually probably at the most danger here. I just paid $60 for this game, $70 for this game. I'm willing to put up with a lot of stuff, but confusing me, frustrating me is one of the things where I have a lower degree of tolerance. So in that initial startup, when I don't have a lot of context as to what the game is the place where you want to avoid confusion as much as possible. As I'm making this video, I'm realizing that I really want to call it character creation. If anyone makes a racing game and they have a custom car creator, can you just call it a character creator? I guess that's a ask that I'm throwing out into the world. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources that this channel needs to keep running. If you're interested in becoming a member, there's a link to that down in the description. We also have a Patreon if you are more comfortable with that. We have merch as well. This is the High Tea on the High Seas hoodie, which will be tagged in this video. Any merch you are interested in will also help the channel out. What's a game you played where it confused you in a way that was frustrating? Have you played a game where that confusion was part of the experience and you actually enjoyed being confused? Let's talk about that down in the comments. I will see you again soon. Thank you.